back to my table here, we were reacting and listening to what was happening. I mean, that last point that he just raised about who was going to write a check and the donations. I mean, McCarthy was a very big ability prolific ability to donation fundraiser. So who's going to donate now?
I don't know. I can tell you this. 2 months ago, I co-hosted an event for the Speaker to protect the House for Republicans and Republican challenger candidates across the country. We raised a significant amount of money. It was actually the most money raised in the DMV for Republicans. McCarthy raises money well. Mega donors, one in particular, I won't name the person's name, wrote $1 million check top of this year for Republicans. They like McCarthy. And all of these folks are talking about these agendas and they want to have this Republican majority. You have to win elections to have a majority. So I don't buy this argument from Gates and the others that they're doing this for the furtherance of conservative ideas. I don't see that.
But I think I can give. Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say, I think, though, this is what we've been seeing playing out within the Republican Party for some time now, right? You've got the MAGA wing, and then you've got the people who consider themselves Republicans, but not MAGA, and then you've got sort of the folks who are never Trumpers who say, I don't have a party anymore. Mm-hmm. And you could hear it in Frank's voice, and it is boiling over. And as Democrats, we have been trying to say for some time, you guys have to work this out because it's ungovernable. And we cannot let the MAGA right wing lead everybody around and try to just enforce their will on the country. And that's what happened. And I mean, they won, frankly, in January when it took 15 rounds for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. They won, and they knew it, and they used their power tonight.
I want you to react to this, Sophia, but also former President Trump did react to the news of tonight, and here is what he said. Why is it that Republicans are always fighting among themselves? Why aren't they
trashes every Republican every day? He's out there trashing everybody. It comes from Trumpism. This is MAGA. That's all he does every day. He's much more likely to trash Republicans than he ever is to trash Putin or, attack people. He attacks General Milley. What Republicans have been saying anything about how he attacked General Milley?
I want to bring us back to what matters. Governing. I want the American people to hear me. Do you remember your civics? The Speaker of the House is second in line to the presidency. Right now, we have a vacancy in that spot. Yeah, we have the pro temp dude that beats the hammer and did some petty stuff tonight. But the reality is that right now, we don't have a governing party that's functioning in its role in the majority. And I think that what is problematic here, Laura, as we go forward is what happens with Ukraine. That's a big issue. Are we going to leave Ukraine hanging? Because if Jim Jordan's Speaker, we ain't getting no Ukraine money. If Steve Scalise has to cut a deal that he will not allow money to be put into a bill for Ukraine, what happens? You're talking about the NATO alliance. You're talking about pre-World War II footing, and what happens if Putin realizes there's a weakness and then goes to Poland and then to Czechoslovakia and other places? Then what are we doing? So this has really serious consequences. I don't give a rat's ass about who's raising money. I care about who's governing.
Well, unfortunately, though, I do want to play for a second. I want you to respond. I want to get in what a congresswoman had to say about this Kelly Armstrong and the very points you're raising right now. Listen to this.
The incentive structure in this town is completely broken. We have descended to a place where clicks, TV hits, and the never-ending quest for the most mediocre taste of celebrity drives decisions and encourages juvenile behavior that is so far beneath this esteemed body.
What's your take?
Well, these are the people who were picking a celebrity apprentice guy as their nominee.
That's right.
So yes, that's a problem, and we need to get back to things like if we want to have a deal, we need to be having things. They want border security. The deal that's there for the taking that Senate Republicans have laid out and worked with Democrats is to have border security money, to have disaster relief, and then have Ukraine money. That is a solid conservative deal, bipartisan deal that's there for the making. And if you're concerned about crime, things that are happening every day here, Republicans should be talking about those issues, not Matt Gaetz's latest problems or whatever's going on. That's the problem.
Let's just reconnect the dots back to why, for example, Ukraine money is a problem. And the people who are opposing the Ukraine money also happen to be Trump people, Trumpers.
Pro-Putin Trumpers, yeah.
Well, and to Donald Trump, Zelensky is an enemy. This is a way for him to exact revenge,
Got
and he's
impeached the first
using
time over it.
Republican House members to do it.
An enemy because he was the basis of the first impeachment hearing, you believe?
Yes, because he would not go along with the scheme to dig up and create some dirt on his soon-to-be, at that time, Joe Biden, who he was going to go up against in 2020. And so to him, he's an enemy, right? I mean, that's how Donald Trump is it's very black and white for him. You're an enemy or you're not. And he is an enemy. Putin is somebody who we know he cares about very deeply. He talks very favorably about him. So I agree with you, Sophia, but I would just say, look, as a Democrat, I think this is bad for the country that the Republican Party is so broken. I think our country is stronger when we have two strong parties and we're actually arguing about ideas, not all this petty, you get out of your office and you lied to me and all this kind of stuff. But, again, some folks want to blame it on Democrats. We can't save you. Your party has to get together and figure out what are you going to do about Donald Trump and the MAGA wing in your party. Otherwise, we're going to keep coming back to this.
Voters are very sophisticated, I believe, and they are an educated body. And they know what matters to them. There's no one more well-versed in what they want than themselves. However, I do wonder about the stank and the stench of one party bleeding onto the other. I mean, at some point, even though we're talking about Republicans, and we'll be talking about Republicans next week as well when this vote happens, and there'll be cameras on the floor as we saw for those 15 rounds before, at some point the American people go, Congress, get it together.
Congress in general. I mean, I was going to say on the Ukraine funding issue, there was a poll conducted by SSRS for CNN August 4th. 54% of the American population are saying we don't want additional funding for Ukraine. So this idea that Republicans are somehow on an island on this issue isn't backed by actual data, and that data isn't limited to just Republican-leaning individuals. But that's not true, though. It's not true.
Who ran the poll?
It was a
Fox
CNN poll.
News?
No, it's a CNN poll. I'm looking at it right now. I mean, I don't think Democrats have done a good enough job articulating to the American people why are we supporting Ukraine? How long is this going to last?
I explained it earlier.
I'm not saying that I disagree. I'm not saying that I disagree.
Hold on.
It's horrible.
I don't know what's happening right now. Like, we're all adults at this table. Hold on. One after another, one at a time. Everyone wants to hear your very valuable insight. But let me redirect you for a second, because Frank Lutz's point was talking about not just Ukraine, which I know is the meat of the issue you're talking about, but his point was about donations because he believed that they were being punished for having given the American people what they wanted on Saturday, which was to keep the government open. And thinking about that, what do you think the voters feel now?
Well, I think voters do want us to work together. They want us to support our allies.
They want the government open.
They are supporting. They want the government open. And I think they do support us, supporting our allies.
Absolutely.
And regardless, these are issues of principle, and when people are out there supporting.
Not all of the voters, because remember, there is a third of the Republican Party, half of the Republican Party. They will vote for Donald Trump no matter what.
You're right.
They believe that what he says is the gospel, it is the truth.
It's a cult.
And that the rest of whatever.
And if he switched his position, they would agree with him too.
So to Laura's question, though, I think what that brings us back to is, Frank, unfortunately, I mean, he's partially wrong. Broadly, the majority of the American people, absolutely, that's what they want. The problem continues to be that 1/3, that 33%, who they don't care. They're with Matt Gaetz, right? They don't care if it blows everything up. They think that's a good thing.
But
Wait, hold on. I'm hearing something. Hold on, I'm hearing something. The New York panel is screaming they want to get into. Okay.